All right, welcome back to supplementary elections. Mr. Lugo, yes, well, let's start off with your response, having seen how close the Sokoto governorship elections went. Definitely some will not be happy having lost out in the entire process. But you've also kept tabs on it. How do you see the events playing out moving forward from first on the part of the actors now?
Yeah, I think the result has been declared, as was said. The option that is left is for the losing candidate, either to congratulate the candidate that has just been declared the winner, or to go to court, as the Electoral Act gives that opportunity. But what it also shows is that it's an interesting scenario actually playing out. What it shows is that our democracy is also developing, and that you can actually move from one political party to the another one and still win the election. And I agree with my colleagues who are with you there. It is something we really need to look at again, because the many political parties we have, even though it's an effect of the law, we really need to look at it again. But the reality, one must confess and consider that we don't have political parties in Nigeria with ideologies. What we just have is vehicles for special purpose. So it's obvious that people can move from one political party to the other. It's interesting, but it's also something we need to be looking. And I agree with them that we really need to ask ourselves, do we need all these political parties at the end of the day? Or do we need to cut down on them and then have an alternative to both the PDP and the APC? Because as many people have actually argued, you are not sure whether there is actually a difference between the two political parties. But here we are with them, and so we congratulate those who have won and those who have lost. If they are not comfortable with the process, I think it is important that they also go to the court. The law has made provision for that, and I think it's something, the importance of judicial pronouncements sometimes, even though it might not be the best in a democracy, is that it also gives us opportunity to review what has happened. I mean, if you also look at the recent pronouncement on Osun State, you also realize that it is important that if you're not satisfied with the outcome of any election, you go to court. The other option is not acceptable, resorting to violence, and that is why we want to encourage those who are not satisfied with the outcome to go to court. But the reality also is that we must be clear that the number of political parties we have is actually also part of the problems that INEC is having in terms of managing the number. And of course, you realize what happened in Adamawa and where they are in court in Adamawa, that unfortunately INEC omitted one of the logo of the political parties and they went to court. Even though one would not have expected these things to be happening now, but here we are. So for me, it's part of the argument we are still making, that there is need to review what has happened during this election. If we're able to have credible 3 or 4, max 5 political parties, probably taking a benchmark from those who were able to win 1 or 2 seats during this election, that may be a way to go. But that will also demand that we need to amend the law, because as the law stands now, we can actually agree and before the end of the year we get another political party, and that's by effect of the law. But we still need to ask ourselves the real truth: do we really need all these parties as we move towards our democracy?
What do you think? Do you think we need them? How would you like to see them?
As I was saying, I think as the law stands now, there's actually freedom of association. The Constitution is very clear on that. The Electoral Act is also clear on what are the requirements to form a political party. But if you look at the numbers that some of the political parties are returning, you ask what makes them a political party, really? And why should we continue to have them in our ballot boxes? So I think we need to look at it again. We need to look at the law. And normally what happens is that there's a process of realignment, integration and reintegration and all those things. But In Nigeria, the unfortunate thing is that there is actually no political ideology. So people band together maybe just to capture political office. And if things are no longer working again, if things fall apart, they move on. And of course, we're also aware that some politicians actually belong to different political parties. So it becomes a matter of convenience. When the going is good in this particular political party, they will go on with it. If they don't win the primaries, they will just flash the card of the next political party and join the bandwagon. It doesn't all go well. You will be surprised, but I wouldn't be surprised actually if between now and the end of this year, we have politicians moving from one political party or the other. And sometimes it raises the question of, are we voting for an individual or are we voting for a political party? If you can just wake up, despite what is in the law, despite the judgments that we have had in several places, politicians still find it very easy to carpet cross from one political party to the other without any anything to actually stop them from
all right,
doing
so
that.
speaking
I
about...
think it's something we really need to seriously interrogate.
You know, earlier you suggested that there needs to be an audit for these particular elections. Did you get access to any reports for 2015 elections, for instance? Okay, I mean, we had our own reports. I mean, civil society organizations had their own reports about what happened. But if you also take if you take a close look at what had happened in 2015, even though it had its own flaws, I guess there was one thing. There was what you can call a quantum leap in that election. In that was the first time that an incumbent lost the election. And then even before the final result was released, my apologies, Mr. Oligbo.
Made a phone call to congratulate.
I thought you were referring to an audit by the commission themselves. I am not sure I have seen a formal audit by INEC in terms of what happened in 2015. But what I'm saying is that for 2019, there is need for a review. Because if you compare 2015 and 2019 elections, there are similarities, there are also differences. Huge differences in terms of both the outcome and both the process. And therefore, it is important that we sit down, not just only civil society, because I know that civil society organizations are actually planning to do something. But I also know that the federal government should do something, because I remember when the postponement happened, when the election was rescheduled, I remember the president said that there was need after the elections to actually understand why INEC postponed the election. INEC as an institution has also come out to actually agree that there is need for that audit. And I think it will be a legacy for the president actually to look closely at what happened before the election was. Why should this... So that it will help us as we move forward. Why should this audit... Are you saying that this audit should be from the president, the federal government? Hello? No, the thing is this. The thing is this. There should be different phases. But the federal government has that primary responsibility to review the 2019 elections. INEC, as an organization, as an institution that is mandated by law to conduct an election, also has a responsibility to audit the elections and tell Nigerians what really happened. I also believe that civil society organizations, Nigerians have a right to organize a public hearing or a summit to look at what happened during the 2019 elections. So for the federal government that is now going to run the last lap of the administration, one of the legacies that they should leave for Nigerians is a review of the 2019 general elections, and also a review of electoral reform, a review of our electoral laws, to ensure that what happened in 2019 does not repeat itself in 2023. Do you think INEC also, as a body, actually also needs to do something? Right. Do you think that people will refer much more to the reports, audit report by civil society and federal government as opposed to that of INEC? Well, you know, in law, there's a natural justice principle of nemo judice in causa sua that says you cannot be a judge in your own case. I know people will be contending that INEC may not do a good job, but
it's a process. So they also need to, because from our own experience and from our own assessment, the reality is that INEC's problem was both internal and external. There was sabotage, both within and outside INEC. So they really need to come clean and tell us what really happened. But beyond what INEC is doing, what INEC is going to do is not going to be final. That might be subjected to whatever the federal government is going to do finally. So that if the federal government now sets up a committee of inquiry or whatever, judicial commission of inquiry to look at what happened during the elections, whatever comes out of the INEC process should actually be submitted to the federal government. And then civil society organizations, if we come together as we plan to do, to review the elections, whatever is also the outcome of that process will definitely be submitted to that expected review process that we expect the federal government as a legacy to conduct before the
one more thing, Mr.
And I think the earlier debater, you know, why the hammer is still hot.
When you say that they should submit the report to the federal government, many will say to what intent? Because if you look through the last amendments that went back and forth between the National Assembly and the president, they said, look, well, they didn't see the presidency come up with a particular bill to amend the Electoral Act. INEC came up with some. National Assembly eventually came up with theirs. So why would then they need to submit it to the federal government if that was the case?
No, I think we're discussing two different things here. There are two different things here. One is the bill that was submitted to the federal government. And the president refused to assent it for some reasons. That process is quite different. And what we are saying is that the 8th National Assembly still has that power to review that law in consideration to some of the changes the president had requested.
Okay, let me rephrase the question.
Submit it to the president before May 29.
Let me rephrase, perhaps. Now, the thing is, if looking at those amendments, now, what will be wrong if INEC does an audit to find out what exactly went wrong, where do we need to improve, and then they come up with a proposal or a bill, if you will, and submit to the National Assembly for amendment? Would there be anything wrong with that?
You see, it's going to be a process. And if we don't, our argument is simple. We don't need to merge the two processes. Because if you merge the two processes, it will go into the 9th Assembly. And once it goes into the 9th Assembly, of course, you know there will also be issues of who is going to be the leadership of the National Assembly, and then the government has to settle down again as to start the process of administration and all those things. So before we hear what is going to happen to that particular bill again, we might be in 2022 or 2023. So what we are saying is that the process that has already gotten to the president should be completed before May 29. Once that is completed, we now have a template to do a review. So the law that is currently before the National Assembly should actually be submitted to the president before the end of May and before this administration comes to an end. That will now be a template for whatever discussions we are going to have in terms of the review of the 2019 general election. If we merge it together, then what we are looking at, because we know what once the new administration comes in, there are issues of election, there are issues of the government sitting down, there will be appointments, the cabinet is going to change, legislators, of course, will definitely juggle for appointments and all those things. We are going to lose the tempo. And before they settle down, the year must have ended. And of course, you know, Nigerians are politically active. By early next year, competition for political positions will start again. So we should not merge the two processes together. Okay,
I thought you were talking about an audit report that needed to be acted upon moving forward. But if you're talking about them doing something before this assembly is over, I don't know how that is going to work out.
There's a lot of valid points in the questions you've asked, because, I mean, liberals, one would want to ask the question really, who is to champion the review process of these elections? Is it INEC or the federal government or CSOs?
If you're waiting for INEC to champion the review of the process, INEC that had said that they don't have capacity to prosecute or to do that which has been donated to them, or the fact that, you know, at every election, INEC identifies problems and say, look, there's need to discuss this problem, but they never kick-started discussion. I think, and then also if you're waiting for the government, who are beneficiaries of some of these inadequacies, you know, to kickstart the process, I doubt if they will ever do it. And so that's where the responsibility falls on, you know, the civil society, who are collaborators, or who have identified these problems, some of these issues. And so we're discussing now. This is part of the problems. We have identified them. And so you also have civil societies who are field workers, who have, in the process of working or collaborating with INEC, had identified some of these problems. And so I expect that, you know, that discussion can start at that level. Well, and if we start that discussion at that level, we'll take it to, you know, collaborate with the media, not just, you know, in seminars only. And then you take the discussions from the civil society level to the media. No,
don't worry. The question will come after the process. Pardon me. We'll come back to this in just a moment. Stay with us. Okay, now go ahead.
Yeah, we're trying to how do we say this? Set
the agenda
in motion.
Yes,
the process of reviewing. Yeah. You know, what I was going to you know, have you respond to the other time is, look, the 2007 election, the president of the day was the one that said, there's something wrong with the process that brought me into government.
Yes.
Let's review it. So it was a project that was initiated by the federal government at that time.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where there was a report. Well, for obvious reasons, that process couldn't continue. Probably that would have been followed with a bill to amend the laws and all of that. So what's wrong with the federal government taking it on?
If you notice, from 1999 until that time, the process of review and electoral reforms were largely driven by opposition. That was what even led to the Waste Panel report. And after that report, it was also the opposition that kept insisting that we must visit the Waste Panel report. And because also, you know, politicians will not request for a reform if it will not be beneficial to them. And so that's why the civil society, who are partners in the process, if we kickstart this process, then we'll take it up from the media. The media will now begin to set agendas. And that will compare the government, the National Assembly, and everybody to now see the need, you know, to have a holistic discussions on it. Unlike this knee-jerk approach that we've always had from 1999 to date. In 2002, we amended the Electoral Act for the 2003 election. In 2006, we amended the Electoral Act for the 2007 election. In 2010, we amended for the 2011 election. 2011, there were politics. And then also, in 2015, you saw the amendment, and all of the politics is generated. And so if you're leaving it for the government of the day or the politicians to set up panels, to set up panel, and you think you'll be able to achieve a holistic amendment, we'll never get it.
Mr. Ogunle, what's wrong with an INEC taking it on itself?
No.
Being, you know, the one in the thick of it.
I think that given all that we've undergone in this cycle of election, we need seriousness of purpose as a people and as a country. And I would really want to see the federal government of Nigeria, the executive branch, the president specifically, doing something that is better than what Yar'Adua did in 2007. By putting in place a grand commission that INEC as a body will collaborate or participate with, that the political parties will have their nominees or members as part of, that civil society will be part of, that will look through all these, do a general review, make recommendations, use as working documents all the reports that have been generated, you know, on previous election, including the recommendations, look at the bill that is yet to be signed into law, and look at those provisions in the light of occurrences in this cycle of election, and then make recommendations that can be looked at and then eventually become part of a new electoral act or law. Some of the problems that we had are not just legal or statutory impediments. They are also social problems. They are political problems. that I think that we must all think through. Some of the things that we've seen in the election, for example, the violence that we've seen, the destruction that we've seen of election materials, and the conduct of political party members. You know, how do we deal with all this in such a way that we can improve on our electoral system? People have talked about the electronic voting. You've had INEC officials come here say that even if we have that system, we must have some PayPal trail so that you don't have a system that is going to generate more problem than you are trying to solve. So I think we need that. If we say the civil society should be the driver, can be debating, and then nothing gets done. If you say the legislature should do that, they can amend the law. They won't solve all the problem. If you say INEC alone should do that, they will look at what they have to do and will make recommendations, and this may not fly. The executive branch of government in a country, regardless of political partisanship, is a very strong arm of government because it initiates policies. It implements the laws that are made by the executive, and so it occupies a central position. I'm not here to say that it's the most important arm of government, but what I'm saying is that they lead the country. The legislature don't do that. The judiciary don't do that. And so they occupy a pivotal position in bringing about new things. And regardless of our reservations about the present occupants of power at various levels in the country, I think it behooves them to ensure that they beat a path to electoral sanity in our country, and that our democracy is improved upon, in years to come.
All right, Liberal Shoma, a legal practitioner, GT Ogunye, Channel CV's election consultant, and Benson Olugbo, Executive Director, Clean Foundation, who joined us from our studios in Abuja. Gentlemen, thank you all for coming on today on supplementary elections. Well, that's it from us. Well, the program continues on the hour. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
I am Akinde here. Thanks for watching.